The following program is being brought to you by Reign of Fire Radio, a media outreach arm of Reign of Fire Evangelical Ministries. Our commitment is to sponsor programs that will assist in living a Christian life and win others through teaching the finished work of Jesus Christ. Welcome to Delivered or Deceived with your host, Rand Berkey. Rand is a former cult member who now educates people on the dangers of these types of groups, as well as people who would seek to exploit and terrorize others. Rand has devoted his life to providing assistance to those who have been hurt. No one wants to be led through the wilderness by a guide who has never been there. He has, and his desire is that you will find yourself delivered and not deceived.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Reign of Fire Christian Radio, the media outreach arm of Reign of Fire Evangelical Ministries. As on every broadcast, we have one of the foundational scriptures of Reign of Fire Radio and Reign of Fire Evangelical Ministries. In Luke 4:17 through 19, it states, Jesus was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." Jesus is the message, and I'm only one of the messengers. Well, as you've seen by the title, we're talking about sex, God, and intimacy. And sex and God's view of it is one of the major subjects in the Bible. He is not shy about it, and yet Christians get squeamish and want to run from it. The first of the 6-part series will deal with an overview. Part 2 will deal with the Old Testament, Part 3 with the Gospels, Part 4 with the Gospels, Part 5 the Epistles, and Part 6 Satan, Drugs, and Rockin Roll. Now the overview. The idea of sex and intimacy has been intertwined since the beginning of mankind. The idea of sex and the passion that goes along with it, or at least the physical desire of it, has consumed man from the beginning of time, like I said before. This is how we get societies. This is how we get families. This is how we get children. And what we see in the Bible is the progression of good and bad, of intimacy or using sex as the only way to have intimacy. Sex involves passion. Intimacy has a sense of belonging, of faithfulness, even of unity. As we see in the beginning of the Bible, in Genesis, we find man getting involved in intimacy and sex. Now the thing is that did not happen till after the fall of man. First, God's relationship was with Adam and Eve. In the cool of the day, they walked and talked and spoke to each other. But after man sinned, there was that separation. And after that separation, then is when humankind as we know it was started. Now it says in Genesis 4:1, "And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord." Now if you read the first couple of chapters of Genesis, God talks about a man coming, a person coming that Satan, the serpent, was bruise his heel. However, Satan would be crushed by him. Eve knew this. She had heard that prophecy from God. And when she conceived Eve, when she said, I got a man from the Lord, she thought she had the man, the one who is going to redeem them and redeem them from their sin. Well, not so much. In Genesis 4:1, it states, again, that Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, called him, there was Abel, that replaced, and then after that, Seth. Because what did happen? Cain destroyed, he killed Abel. And this is before Abel had any children. And because of this, when Seth was born, it says that Eve said that she had appointed, God appointed Seth as replacement of Abel, whom it says Cain destroyed. So we have the progression, we see the history of mankind, we see who married who, we see the ancestry, and we see that in Genesis 6, 1 through 5, that man becomes multiplied on the earth. And it states in Genesis 6, 1 through 5, and it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, then the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair. And they took wives, all of them, which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be numbered 120 years. Now, one of the things I'd like to say about that is we often hear that in the Old Testament, in the during the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, especially when we're talking about the children of Israel and the problems that they had in going into the Promised Land, God said, okay, you'll be numbered between 70 or 80 years, and they will fall asleep. Well, that's not what God originally spoke. He said he spoke that they'll be no more than 120 years. And if you look at before that, they were living hundreds and hundreds of years. Methuselah being one of the oldest, or the oldest, in the Old Testament before the law, before the children of Israel. And it says, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of man came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them. The same became mighty men, which were of old of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of the heart was only evil continually. Well, that means man did basically whatever he wanted. And because of that, because they were so consumed with themselves and what they wanted, then it became a fact that, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, is the type of thing. And there was no law. It was a survival of the fittest, so to speak. And so there was, I guess, no basis of what God would want to say is of morality. The other thing about this is oftentimes when we're looking at the history of Christianity or the history of the Bible, people talk about the giants of old as being maybe the Greek gods and Greek goddesses. It may be talking about people like Hercules, or how we see as demigods, where the men and women of that time are part human and part man. And oftentimes this has been discussed as possibly one of the reasons or one of the identifications of what happened during that time before the destruction, the second destructions of the earth. So then we get to the time of Noah, and how the ark was made, and how all humankind was destroyed from the face of the earth because of this idea of men being evil continually, except for Noah. And it says Noah found grace in the sight of the Lord, and it's through the family line of Noah that we see the world as it is today, humankind as it is today. So as we go through, we see different times, we see different things going on, where we can talk about Abraham and Lot and what happened there and what was going on. We also talk about Balaam. Now, Balaam is recognized, and we'll get into that further when we discuss, things in the things of right before the law, as the children of Israel were wandering around in the desert. We also see him mentioned in the New Testament. We also see him specifically in the Epistles, where it was talked about where Balaam did such a grievous sin that he's continued to talk about throughout the course of the Bible as being one of the people that actually destroyed the children of Israel, or attempt to. And the reason I say that is because of what he led the children of Israel to do through the hands of Balak, which was a king at that time. Balak wanted Balaam to curse the children of Israel, which Balaam did not, but he gave the way on how the children of Israel could be destroyed, and destroyed upon themselves. Then we talk about Psalms and the passion in Psalms, and the identification of, between God and humankind, between God and the individual, and David's passion towards God, where it talks about where David was a man after God's own heart. Yet we also see David's failing when he stepped away, and where he no longer identified at one time as a man after God's own heart, that David did something that was, for lack of a better word, horrendous. But God restored him later on, and even through the relationship with the woman whose husband that David killed, we have who comes up, which is Solomon. And in Solomon Proverbs, it talks about the man that goes after wisdom, and the identity of wisdom is a woman. But we also see the division of man between God as harlotry. And that's what we're really talking about, ladies and gentlemen, the difference between the oneness with God, what's called the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace in the New Testament, against that which is the destruction of Israel. And it's through that lack of intimacy, the intimacy that they found and then they lost through the worshiping of other gods, because that worshiping of other gods resulted in sexual misconduct, for lack of a better word.